ha sido posible gracias al gentil patrocinio de Cegnesis, de Cybersecurity Company y Código Verde, consultores de seguridad de la información.
¿Deseas complementar tus conocimientos de seguridad de la información?
¿O iniciar tu formación en esta disciplina?
En ambos casos, el CITI te ofrece el panorama más completo en un solo entrenamiento.
El CITI aborda más de 40 temas. Combina sesiones en vivo con ejercicios y prácticas, así como lecciones en video.
Al finalizar, conocerás el compendio más amplio de prácticas generalmente aceptadas.
Los profesionales de tecnologías de la información que ahora son llamados a mantener y mejorar la seguridad de su organización
encuentran en el CITI la referencia más confiable.
Ya saben hacer su trabajo. El CITI los faculta para hacerlo con seguridad.
Inscríbete y serás un profesional CITI acreditado por el CONSEJOSI.
El CONSEJOSI es una organización de voluntarios de alcance internacional y actualmente estamos convocando a quienes integrarán los comités durante el 2022. ¿Te interesaría incorporarte a nuestra organización? Para facilitar tu ingreso, hemos diseñado un proceso que inicia visitando nuestro sitio web. Puedes colaborar desde tu país en cualquiera de los siguientes comités y foros: Comité Técnico, Comité de Vinculación, Comité de Relaciones con la Industria, Comité para CIOs y CISOs, Comité de Mujeres en Seguridad, Comité del Cybersecurity Nation 2022 y Foro para el Sector Público. Te invitamos a registrarte ahora mismo e iniciar tu trayectoria en el CONSEJOSI. Esperamos pronto darte la bienvenida. Este webinar ha sido posible gracias al gentil patrocinio de Cegnesis, de Cybersecurity Company y Código Verde, consultores de seguridad de la información. El CONSEJOSI les da la bienvenida. Nos complace que nos acompañen y les animamos a seguir el camino del CONSEJOSI para elevar la seguridad de la información y ciberseguridad en la escala nacional. Antes de iniciar, les invitamos a suscribirse a nuestro canal si aún no lo han hecho y activar las notificaciones para que no se pierdan ninguno de nuestros videos o eventos en vivo. Si les gusta este video, denle like y compártanlo con las personas que les pueda hacer útil la información, o bien pueden guardar el video para no perderlo de vista. Lo podrían necesitar después. Presento a los ponentes de esta mañana. Marc Ayala. Es un profesional de automatización de procesos con más de 25 años de experiencia trabajando en instalaciones petroquímicas, donde diseñó, implementó y mantuvo su instrumentación de procesos, sistemas de automatización y redes de control de procesos. Actualmente es el director global ICS Ciberseguridad y líder de sector en 1898 & Co., parte de Burns & McDonnell. Cuenta con experiencia en sistemas de seguridad, control de procesos avanzados, historiadores empresariales y seguridad de redes industriales, donde trabajó con TI empresarial para implementar una solución de seguridad corporativa de PCN. Participa activamente en los esfuerzos de seguridad cibernética para los sectores de petróleo y gas, puertos marítimos, instalaciones en alta mar y productos químicos. Trabaja en conjunto con entidades federales, locales y estatales para proteger el sector privado. David Taboada. Es originario de Monterrey, México. Durante la década de los 90 dirigió una empresa de consultoría y desarrollo de sistemas. De 1990 a la fecha ha desempeñado diversos cargos de liderazgo en organismos empresariales. Ha sido conferencista internacional y redactado artículos sobre negocios, tecnología y seguridad. Actualmente dirige a Código Verde, una empresa de consultoría de seguridad de la información, y es el presidente fundador del CONSEJOSI. Su enfoque actual se centra en apoyar a consejos y equipos directivos a tomar decisiones acertadas de seguridad de la información. Agradecemos a los expositores por su tiempo. Antes de iniciar, les invitamos a colocar sus preguntas en el chat durante el webinar. De esta manera, nuestro equipo las hará llegar a los expositores para que puedan ser respondidas. Una vez más, bienvenidos al evento y gracias por acompañarnos.
Buenos días, amigos, gracias por estar nuevamente en una transmisión del CONSEJOSI. Esta mañana estamos platicando con Marc Ayala y vamos a hablar acerca de tecnología operacional, y lo que vamos a hacer en esta mañana es que toda la presentación va a ser en inglés. Lo digo esto para todos los que generalmente hablan en español y para que, bueno, ustedes tengan la referencia. Así es que de aquí en adelante ya me voy a presentar con Marco en inglés, y de aquí en adelante toda la conversación será en ese idioma, incluyendo la sesión de preguntas y respuestas. Aunque ustedes van a poder poner sus preguntas en español, yo con todo gusto se las traduzco en inglés y obtendremos en inglés la respuesta de Marco. Esa es la forma en la que vamos a manejar este webinar. Quédense porque está sumamente interesante el tema, se los puedo asegurar. Yo ya platiqué antes con Marco y la verdad es que trae mucho que compartirnos. Marc, thank you for coming. Thank you for being here with us.
Thank you, David, and thank you for the opportunity to be here and to speak on things that are very important in today's world, and especially cybersecurity happens to be one of those.
Yes, it is. So, Marc, let me start off by saying that many guys in our audience are CIOs or CISOs, and I think that operation technology security, it's a very interesting issue right now, given the threat landscape and everything that is going on. So let's start this conversation telling us what are the difference what are the main differences that you in your practice have come to understand with information security and operation technology security?
Great question, David. So it does all come down to data, but it's how the data is used, and especially in real-time operating systems, where there's a cyber and physical process that is managed, maintained, manipulated, and also monitored, is a difference between your traditional infrastructure or IT type enterprise security and applications. For the most part, one of the big differences, David, is in traditional information security. There is a triad for security, and that's confidentiality, integrity, and availability. And for those that are the CIOs and the CISOs that are attending today, this is not anything that is new to them. Confidentiality is premier. Integrity of that information is paramount as well. And then availability. It's lower down the stack of information, but it's still something that has to be there. Losing or being down for a short period of time, say on an email server, an SAP application, those can be unfortunate. However, it's tolerable, it's recoverable, as long as the data stays confidential and it stays pristine. Which on the flip side is opposite of that of operational technology, and especially in industrial control systems and SCADA, supervisory control and data acquisition. And that is where safety and reliability are paramount, right? Where availability is the very most important, along with integrity. So it has to be available, the systems, the networks, the comunicado, the communications, but also it has to be good data. Just because you have connectivity doesn't mean the data is good. And that's important whenever you're talking about valve statuses or compressor stations that need to run, knowing their horsepower, knowing flow rates, knowing the instrumentation that feeds these cyber physical assets that maintain and operate your country, other countries across the globe, which is considered critical infrastructure. So the big difference, to go back to your question, is that although it all is technology based, one is primarily and fundamentally moving or creating or operating equipment, where the other is more of a database infrastructure, PCII type environment, which is very important, very important. IT and IT security is a very important piece. And so is operational technology and securities. But we have our things turned a little bit backwards, where safety and reliability are paramount.
Thank you very much. Well, that clarifies a lot of the things around operational technology. So tell us what you do right now and what are the challenges your customers are facing, Marco, to understand that reality.
Yeah, so I am a global director for industrial control systems security at 1898 & Company, which is a division of Burns and McDonnell. We do have offices all over the US and also in Mexico and in Canada and across the globe. The main function for my group is security, and very much focused on operational technology. And so we have a very large team, and with wide expertise from IT, traditional IT security background in architecture, design, certifications, but also we have automation professionals, safety professionals, and OT security vendor qualified personnel. And so where we're tasked is working with large, whether it's oil, gas, pharmaceutical, chemical companies, or even manufacturing. Clients come to us because they want that third party ability to verify and assure that what they have in the field is identified, and that they have a good grasp on their, as you said earlier, their attack surface, understanding any of the threat scenarios that they may have exposure to. So many of my clients task us with coming out and not taking a vendor's word for it or an integrator's word for it, or maybe even the IT side's word for it. Try to understand the connections, the equipment, the maturity. But one of the big things, David, is culture. To understand the culture, you really need experienced eyes from that background to go out into the plant, but also understand and hear the technicians, the electricians, or the instrumentation folks, but to really get a feel on what is the struggle, what are the things that are left exposed, what do they need to be able to perform their job. And so our customers come to us and say, please come out and give us an idea of what is really there. And that's the value add. And a lot of clients that we've worked with have seen that value and benefit, identifying exposed risks they had no idea. And it's important, especially in today's with geopolitical tension, war. Our exposure is amazing, and I'm sure it's not just in one country; it's globally. We are a globally connected environment. 20 years ago, we were not near as connected as we are now. We did not have cloud computing. We didn't have the speeds of the CPUs, the computers, but also the networks. So the ability for us to do a video call today was not really available 20 years ago, or even really stable 10 years ago. So we've really moved a lot, and that's great. With this technology and this capability and this connectivity has provided optimization, but also we must not forget security must be a part of anything and everything we do, regardless of sector, regardless of our distinct industry. We have to make good decisions, and we have to understand what those decisions mean.
Mark, when a company wants to know what's their security posture, they might call consultants and ask them for penetration tests, risk assessments, and perhaps security control assessments. I've heard that you do risk assessment.
We do.
But it is impractical to do a pen test on a plant or a manufacturing plant, because if you have a finding, you might wreck some equipment. So what do you do in that case? What's the difference between the information security world and the operation technology world here?
So you bring up a very good point, David, especially when pen testing in the operational technology side of the house, of your business, your corporation. You know, you're making and manufacturing things or moving product. Doing a pen test on things that could impair, degrade, impact, could have high consequences and also high costs associated with those. To change out a computer, a fixed amount of cost. To change out a controller on a running plant in an environment, including downtime, including the replacement of that part in man hours, it could be expensive. And so it's a different approach. Also, David, I have to say that I get asked a lot from clients that want a pen test, that want to go in and pen test their environment. And what we find in many instances that they don't really need a pen test. What they really need is to identify what they have, document the vulnerabilities, and instead of going in at it from a blind eyes view, understand what they have to be able to see what the exposures are. So it's almost like a reverse pen test, but from a blue team, a defender's perspective. And the best part of that is by doing so, you can actually have drawings, asset inventory created. So, and the problem that we see with traditional pen tests is that not all pen tests are the same. You can hire 3 different bodies, very experienced, and they'll have 3 different results or additional results that the other one didn't collect. If you look at Colonial Pipeline that happened in the US, where ransomware was impacted, they did a pen test. The CEO went before Congress and said, yes, you know, when asked, you know, have you done a pen test? And they did. But obviously they didn't pen test the whole system because there were some things that were left behind, a vulnerability within a VPN server on a user that was then identified on the dark web through credential harvesting. So again, pen tests are okay, but maybe a vulnerability study to understand that VPN server or that connection into your control system environment may provide more value. And at the end of it, as opposed to having a report saying, yes, we broke in, you have problems, maybe having a different approach and say, here's your architecture, here's your data flows, here's your access points, here's your threat scenarios. Now you're ready if you want to do a risk assessment, but here's your system from a vulnerability approach. And I think that's the value add from our company is, can we give you a pen test? Yes. Is that truly what you want and need? That's the question. And I usually find that within the first 5 minutes of discussion with the CISO and the CIO, I ask, can you provide us all the accurate drawings? Can you provide us 100% complete inventory? And have you documented all your vulnerabilities? And usually the answer is, we think so. Maybe we have vendor package drawings. And the last time we actually went out to the field was 2 years ago. And so when you're looking at it from a pen test side, I can say, well, sure, we'll go in, we'll pen test it. You're not going to be happy with the results. And it depends on the CISO and the CIO too, is if they need to have a budgetary means, then maybe the pen test is the right idea. But really coming from it from a different approach is very important. So ask yourself, those that are on the other side of this this pane of glass that we're talking in, is that, do you have accurate drawings? Do you have an accurate inventory? Do you really know where your unverified trust is from your third-party vendors, your OEMs, your integrators? And if the answer is we think, or we're not sure, or then maybe looking at it from a vulnerability assess is a much better approach.
Especially infrastructure that has been built several years ago, they might not have the security. They wouldn't have security in mind by design, and things were perhaps patched together, and that's when the problem arises. Is that so?
It is, David. It's so. It's going to be so today. It's going to be so tomorrow. And the reason for that is that when we were talking about plant environments, refineries, pipelines, the immediate focus is reliability and safety and operations. Security is typically an afterthought. We are trying to work with clients to actually have that security aspect of OT in the very conceptual stages of engineering, before even it goes to the vendors for procurement. Having a cybersecurity requirement specification in the request for proposal is completely important. It's an imperative. Also, with that being said, making sure as an asset owner, or even a consultant or an integrator, is making sure that you're preparing through the engineering phase and cycle to when you get to factory acceptance testing, FAT is what we call it in the US, that you have security FAT also designed and ready. And once it's checked out and everything is operationally sound and meets your requirements and meets the security requirements that was put into the request for proposal, then once it's rolled out to the site, making sure nothing has changed. And that's a big problem. The same team that will put the system together at the factory or at the integrator may not be the same team that deploys it to the field. And so what happens is portable media usage, turning off of antivirus, adding users, not just users, but even new domains, or adding new machines or changing machines. happen steadily. So you have to make sure that you go through the whole process and embed security in. Now, in a perfect world, we would look at security and bake that in, but we understand that costs money. But I will say this, I've done many of these FATs and SATs, and it costs 4 to 5 times more to be able to go and do the assessment, the remediation work after it's installed, as opposed to catching it at the very front end and adding that money to the project cost. So it's up to you. From a CISO, from an engineering manager, an engineering director, do we pay now or do we pay 4 or 5 times as much more to try to fix the problem later? And you know, it's best to address it up front.
There's a similar situation in information security, and it relates to software development. If you integrate security, even from the requirements phase of the software development life cycle, it costs 1/10 of what it would cost to remediate when the software is already finished and then you're trying to fix it. So it's the same principle, and yes, operational technologies should have security by design in the early stages of the project.
Right.
Mark, we're going for a pause. Only 1 minute. We have special information for our audience from CONSEJOSI. Please stay with us. We will be returning in 1 minute.
El mundo no es ciberseguro. Cámbialo. ¿Cómo? Participa en las iniciativas del CONSEJOSI. Si eres experto y tienes algo que compartir con la comunidad, te ofrecemos 3 opciones. 1. Inscribe tu tema y ven a conversar en un webinar. 2. Envíanos tu artículo original e inédito. 3. Presenta tu ponencia en el Cybersecurity Nation Conference 2022. Independientemente de ser experto o no, si te interesa participar en alguno de nuestros comités, inicia tu proceso de incorporación al Cuerpo Internacional de Voluntarios del CONSEJOSI. Bienvenidas todas las nacionalidades. Explora todas estas opciones en consejosi.org/participa. El mundo no es ciberseguro. Participa.
Well, thank you for staying with us, and thank you, Mark, again for this very interesting conversation. I would like to keep on talking about the relationship between the CIOs and the CISOs and plant managers, and how all this security issue is managed. And one of the first things that come up is, what about shadow IT? Have you when you go into a with a customer and look at whatever they have you noticed there's things that the CIO isn't aware of that exist in there? Is that an issue?
How do you define shadow IT, David, in your perspective or in your enterprise IT world? How is that defined?
Well, I would say that shadow IT is something that is running a computer, and the IT guys don't know about it. It's not in their inventory. It's not managed by them.
Yes. So the answer to your question in the operational technology side is yes. It happens. It exists, especially when you have a complex environment where you have third-party applications and equipment. Imagine a plant with air compressors. Imagine a plant with air purification, or even water treatment or boilers, heaters, thermal oxidizers, whatever it may be. Those may not be managed and maintained directly from your facility. So these networks established, although they have connectivity, may be those shadow OT networks that you don't know about. And we see that a lot when we do boots on the ground field assessment. We go out in the field and we're looking at drawings and we're saying, well, this is not captured. This is not captured. The cell modem is nowhere to be found on a drawing or even known to the plant manager. And those are real problems. So the shadow OT could be the OEM, the original equipment manufacturer, being able to look at the data, assist, support something you never even knew was there. Yeah. So it's a real risk as well.
So in information security, it's pretty well known that you start from an inventory. You have to know where the data is. You have to know where the systems are. And,
Yes.
And you have to know what every box in your network is doing. Because once you know that, then you know how to secure it. I think that it's also the case in operational technology, and I would say that perhaps the current level of maturity right now in operational technology security is that first of all you need a very good inventory, and I think most of your clients that's one of the first steps. Is that it?
You identifying what you have is the first and key paramount things you need to do. The difference between the IT enterprise for the CISOs and the CIOs compared in the OT world is that in the IT infrastructure, to understand what you have on those nodes on your network, you have to connect it to be able to identify it and to be able to protect it. See, correct? In the operational technology field, you may have islands of communication that are not connected up to a demilitarized zone or a level 3 or a level 3.5 or even connected to L4. So what we're finding is the CISO is also responsible for these islanded systems that are either doing fundamental safety, human safety, process safety, whatever it may be, that are not connected, that also need to be inventoried. The other part that is big difference, especially in identifying that inventory, is knowing everything that is communication based, including serial communications. And the reason I say this is that sometimes, and many times, the serial communications that are not caught on an asset inventory list are just as crucial as the ones that are switched through network switching. And the reason I say that is because of the inherent risk across systems between those serial communications. And we see that a lot when we have customers that have client-to-client interfaces and they have access to even more side of read-write control. And so I guess for the CIO and CISOs that are listening in today is making sure that whoever you partner with, or whether you do it internally, for the operational technology side, you need to get out there and you need to explore and you need to understand where are the conversions, the data conversions, the industrial communication links that could be serial to Ethernet or could be serial to Ethernet. And it's very important, any of those communication spurs. Where we've found value for our clients is finding many system communication links that have capability of connectivity to even outbound internet communications that started out as serial and turned into networked. And those are the things that are crucial to your asset inventory. So don't just stop at the controller or the computer or the human machine interface screen. You need to look at everything total within that architecture and ask the right questions. Another part of that, David, is wireless. Wireless communications, it has come a very long way. And in the manufacturing space and in the oil and gas and chemical space, we are doing a lot of things with transmitters, sensors, transducers, valve alignments. And it's important that we identify and document those. Many of these all go back to the same style access points that traditional IT sets up and uses and also may have vulnerabilities. Again, the impacts are different. The threat scenarios can be the same, but the threat scenarios can also have real world consequences of containment loss, loss of production, downtime, degraded function. In other words, maybe not being able to get out as much transportation as needed to, say, feed a nation, rail. I mean, all these things are very, very important. And so, yeah, I think asset inventory is a huge piece of it. Identification is huge. You can't remediate what you don't know you have.
That's right. You mentioned briefly culture, and I would like you to expand on that. Right now, in the IT space, you have all sorts of awareness programs, and even you have tools that send phishing to people to train them to resist those attacks. Once again, I think operational technology is a very different animal. So, how do you go about in introducing the security value to these guys in the manufacturing floor?
So great question. And the comment here is making sure that in order to get a hold of culture, you do need training, you do need awareness. And it's especially from the OT or the operational technology side, is that you want to make sure that your technicians, the people that touch these systems, do have security training. And more, the IT security training should go to all employees, including contractors. But for the OT, it should be specific to the people that touch and support the function of either a plant or a pipeline or a refinery or a maritime terminal or even a ship or vessel, but also the integrators that also touch those as well. Training is a very important piece, but the culture to make the change is what is paramount. So it takes leadership, it takes supervision, it takes managers to show the value add, and not to make cybersecurity difficult. Make it engaging and make it to where there's a reward for seeing something and trying to identify it and try to make it better. Many times I see programs fail when it comes to cybersecurity training and awareness, which totally affects your culture. And that is bad management. Bad management saying, hey, you've done this wrong. This is not correct. We're going to dock your pay, or don't do this again or you're fired. That's not the right way to go about it. So effectively, if you're going to create a good atmosphere for culture to enable the cyber warriors of your defense team on your operational technology, they need your support, your buy-in, and they need a good pat on the back when things are done right. And so whether that's some type of bonus award or just a person in the internal news of a company saying, this person was able to secure the switches. We've done this for 6 months, and we did this new project, and we should be proud of that. Whatever it may be, to foster culture and change in OT security, we need to award those that are doing a good job. Yeah. So key fundamentals there. Find a standard for OT security, such as ISA or the IEC. 62443 for industrial control systems, which also encompasses building automation, pharmaceutical control. A control system is a control system. There's different industries, different usage. Once you pick that standard, go to the training. Go to that training. It's important to try to pick that standard side of it. I'm an instructor, an ISA instructor, which is a global. ISA is global. They have Mexico, they have Brazil, South America, Canada, all over the world. Find the training local to you and take the training. And take a blue team, a defender approach to your training, and work with your team internally. But I will say to the CIOs and CISOs, I know that you're doing a great job in rolling out these efforts. It takes time, it takes efficacy, it takes a lot of attention to details, but tie in the operational technology training into your computer-based training or CBT that you're currently doing for your personnel, and have the ones that are actually doing the operational technology side take that training and take it annually. And any contractors or integrators coming into your systems, make them take that training and give them a certificate saying that they're aware of the training and that they're good for 1 year and they must recertify with your company. Foster that and people will get the mindset. Third to culture, awareness. Make sure that you're posting around your most critical assets or even in the operator and control rooms and even in the server rooms to think before you connect, think before you use portable media, and have those signs. Make them yourselves. You don't need a consultant to make a sign for you that says think before you connect. But give rewards to that. If you see exposed ports, report that. And when you report it, and you put the plugs in, maybe you'll get some credit or someone, appreciates you. But everyone is part of this process. So the training, awareness, fostering culture is so important from the field up to the boardroom to everyone involved.
And we might add that from the boardroom down, because you talked about bad management, and there's a lot to do first the C-suite, so that it could permeate down the other levels.
Yeah.
So there's an interesting point here. Risk identification. That's not only one thing that a consultant would do. That's something, and that is my point of view. And tell me what happens in OT. Every guy on the plant should be able, or at least the ones that touch this equipment, should be able to identify risk, especially if they are the ones closest to the machinery that's operating under this integrated controls and SCADA and all that stuff. So, but of course, you will not have these guys moving into risk identification if they have not successfully come through awareness and training and all that stuff that would inspire them to do some risk assessment. So in reality, do you see that this training and awareness comes before risk identification by people on the line?
I could say that those are typically can be done in parallel. Obviously, risk identification is typically already done by many facilities because of regulatory, at least in the US. I'm not sure about Mexico. So risk identification, as far as the hazards involved, the impacts, the consequences, and risk management are already really fundamental processes within the operations side. Where the part of the training can help is identifying and addressing that risk identification into the cyber realm. How does that connect? How does that embed into safety? And how do we actually move forward into risk mitigation? Risk identification, risk mitigation, understanding your consequences, and being able to see this is our risk. If we do these things, here's our risk reduction. Here's how we can get within a realm of approved appetite for risk. I think that many of the people that are on the call or that are listening in know that it is a process. To go through the approach, you need to understand your full environment from the boots on the ground, the industry, and risk identification is one. The methodology of being able to capture and run through a risk assessment is what has been lately debated and challenged. And what I mean by that is when we start talking about likelihoods, probabilities, and mean time to impact, those are things that we can throw math at. We can do mathematical studies, and I'm sure Colonial Pipeline probably had some very unique math prior to their exposure to ransomware. Maybe their likelihood was 10 to the minus 3 or 10 to the minus 6 out to the right. But when it happened, it went to a Boolean of 1. It has happened. It will happen. And I think the approach that people should look at is either do a standards-based OT, control system security standards-based approach, such as 62443, the 3-2 standard, but also look at the methodology of CCE, and that stands for consequence-driven cyber-informed engineering. That was developed by Idaho National Labs in the US for the Department of Energy, and it can be used in any industry or any field. Whether you're making fertilizers or whether you're, running operations in the sea, it's understanding your critical function. It's being able to identify your system of systems. But the very first thing that you do, if you agree to a CCE approach, is you take the risk, the likelihood, as a Boolean of 1. It's not if it will happen, it's when it will happen. So you remove that off the table. So if we know it's going to happen, now we get that away. That's not even for discussion anymore. Let's look to see what we have in place as far as identification, vulnerabilities, understanding of the system of systems, what are the system functions, what enables that system to operate, and the human factor. And then the other approach is targeting. Taking scenarios that could actually impact your critical function for your factories, your operations, your refineries, whatever it may be, and looking at it as a grand scale. Not every cyber actor or nation state has the wish or want to maybe have an explosion or create an environmental catastrophe. It may just be more to cause a degraded mode and cause actually a domino effect in your country, to where now logistics are affected, unable to get medical supplies, unable to get food to the table. We have to look at this seriously now because everything is cyber enabled. And yes, David, you had a point?
Yeah, well, that's absolutely correct. And guys, we're all doing a 1-minute pause here. Stay with us because Mark will be wrapping up this after we come back. And we'll remember, we're talking about risk identification and mitigation in operational technology. And we'll put everything together. So stay with us. We'll pause for a minute.
El mundo no es ciberseguro. Cámbialo. ¿Cómo? Participa en las iniciativas del CONSEJOSI. Si eres experto y tienes algo que compartir con la comunidad, te ofrecemos 3 opciones. 1. Inscribe tu tema y ven a conversar en un webinar. 2. Envíanos tu artículo original e inédito. 3. Presenta tu ponencia en el Cybersecurity Nation Conference 2022. Independientemente de ser experto o no, si te interesa participar en alguno de nuestros comités, inicia tu proceso de incorporación al Cuerpo Internacional de Voluntarios del CONSEJOSI. Bienvenidas todas las nacionalidades. Explora todas estas opciones en consejosi.org/participa. El mundo no es ciberseguro. Participa.
Thank you for staying with us, and thank you, Mark, for this so interesting conversation. Will you please expand on what you were talking before we paused for a minute?
Yeah, so I think I was talking about an approach of when you're doing your risk identification, before you can even get to mitigation, you have to understand what you have. You have to understand what those weaknesses are. And it really does formulate around the people, the process, the technology. So once you're able to grab that and using methodologies, whether it's standards-based or a methodology such as CCE, then going into it from a targeting scenario. What is the threat actor? Is it intentional? Is it accidental? What is the level of sophistication? Is it denial of service? Is it malware? Is it generic malware? Is it targeted malware? And what do you have as a company as far as your mechanical stops or your ability to still operate even when you're under attack or fully compromised? And so really going through the process, but understanding those threat scenarios and working through those scenarios will help uncover many of the things that unverified trust in those exposures that you may not even realize you have in your company. And my point is to make sure that you do an assessment and it's very important, whoever you partner with, to have a blind eye view into it. In other words, the unconscious bias that internal companies have within their own auditing team can have real world effects and impacts. And it's not to say that they're not good. Auditing teams are very good at what they do, but they may not see other things that are versed in operational technology, that are versed in control systems, may not see, or can see even more. And the reason I say that is because many companies, they work with the vendor supplies a product, the vendor says it's secure, but is it? Is it really secure? So the old saying, I don't know the Spanish ism, is making sure the fox isn't guarding the hen house. I know my mother is Spanish, and she would tell me what that saying is in Spanish, and she's probably going to hit me later. But making sure that you don't accept. You want to make sure that you go through and you verify and validate and have some kind of verifying assurance, because the world that we live in today, we need to make sure we're doing a good job. So hopefully I covered back over the risk identification, the hazards of it, but also the threats, the targeting approach, thinking at it from an adversarial point of view. How can I get at David's company? How can I impact David's company? Or worse yet, how can I kill David's company and force David to go out of business? Those are the kind of mindset you have to do, and you should be doing.
Thank you, Mark. What can you tell us about mitigation, especially if there is anything different in operational technology versus information security for IT systems?
Yeah, I think for mitigation standpoint, a lot of people talk about cyber hygiene. I think it's important, but that's just the lower level baseline of security. And some will question whether that's security or not. That's just saying, yes, we have passwords. Yes, we use firewalls. Yes, we have application control. But I think we need to do better in the operational technology space to say we should rethink connecting systems that have either direct or indirect data points to the internet or to the cloud. We have to be very careful and understand what our true business need is. What is that optimization? If it's to get someone information into their phone to know when an alarm goes off at the plant, there might be more secure ways of doing it without exposing your facility from its critical controls and needed controls to cyber actors. So there are approaches. There's logical isolation, there's physical isolation, there's demarcation zones that you can put in. And I think some of the other pieces of that, David, is making sure that your incident response plan is truly designed and built from the ground up and not from the top down. And what I mean by that is making sure that engineers and instrument techs are part of what that incident response should be. In a worst case scenario, if the vendor cannot be found, if the integrator cannot be found, and if IT is completely attacked or cyber sabotaged and that network is no longer there, how can we make product without them? And if the answer is we can't, then you need to reconsider and re-architect, not overnight, but re-engineer, putting engineering controls in to bring back the man or the human back into the loop. It's very important that we have that in today's operational world. So those are some of my key aspects: is identification, keep the human in the loop, find your mechanical means of being able to operate, question every communication link up into the enterprise. Is it needed? And create security controls that are used, fundamental, and still encompass some of the great things, obviously, on the outer perimeter of the shell, such that IT security teaches, zero trust, multi-factor authentication, least privilege. That's great. Many of that's not able to operate in the operational field. It's still so infant. 20 years from now, I'm sure there'll be a lot more things and complex and what have you. But as of right now, multi-factor at a PLC is not happening at the PLC yet. So security is not a project, it's a program, it's a life cycle. And we just have to continually make sure that we have resources, either internally, externally, partnering together to be able to make your project, your mission a success. And I know my company, 1898 & Co., Burns & McDonnell, That's exactly what we're here for. Here to help you, help you identify your risk, identify your unverified trusts, but also to help you document what you have in a true perspective.
Thank you very much, Mark. And before we go into the question and answer segment, is there some final remarks you would like to make?
No, David, I want to thank you and your team for allowing me to come in and speak. I really appreciate it. And especially, I really like the fact when IT and InfoSec security wants to work together, because we are in this converged world. We know that IT security doesn't want to assume the inherent risks of the operational technology. But we're here to, and we have to work together. And actually, it takes both teams, both sides, both expertise to be able to make this mission realistic. And so, make sure that you're working with folks, encourage them to do the right thing, promote training, standards-based, and promote that culture. Culture is everything. For the leaders on this call, it really comes from the top. And for those that are listening in from the field level side, I came from the field level side. It's also tasked on you to be able to go and ask your managers, your line managers, your supervisors for that training. And if they say, you don't need cyber, say, yes, we do. We need cyber. It's the first thing or third thing on the CIO's list or CEO's list. I want to be able to protect our environment. I need the training. You need to be able to go and ask for that. And if someone denies you from that, I feel sorry for you, but don't give up hope. Reach out to other people within your organization. Every company should have an OT security program, and don't give up.
Thank you very much, Marco. It's been our privilege to have you here, and thank you for your generous sharing of all these insights and information. Thank you very much. We are now moving to the Q&A session.
Este webinar ha sido posible gracias al gentil patrocinio de Secnesis, de Cybersecurity Company, y Código Verde, consultores de seguridad de la información.
Well, Mark, it's been great having this conversation with you. And we're going to take questions from the audience. So please, guys, write it down, and I'll have them here on my iPad and shoot them directly to Mark. But I have a question before we get started with questions from the audience. What keeps you up at night? And more importantly, what keeps you going in the morning, considering the current threat landscape?
That's a great question. And, there's a lot of things that keep me up at night. Obviously, as you said, with all the geopolitical tensions, the susceptibility to our communication links, there's a lot of things that keep me up at night. What also gets me going in the morning is knowing that we do have globally around the world a lot of practitioners for cybersecurity that are not only IT security focused, but also we are building the next wave of industrial control systems and operational technology security subject matter experts. And it's important that we do and we provide training to them. But not only that, mentorship. So really what gets me up in the morning is knowing that we still have a lot to do. We have a lot of systems and exposure, but I think that the main piece is, for me, at least personally, and through my company, is making sure that training is given and mentoring to either new employees, but also mentoring to the clients. They look to us to actually help them in their current situation, especially where they're resource strapped or may not have the full visibility or understanding of their own environment from a security aspect. So I think that's what really gets me going in the morning, is knowing that there's so much to do, and we have to create the new expert or blue team protector of our system. So that's what gets me going. Great question.
Thank you, Mark. What are the international organizations that are arranging this body of knowledge around ICS and OT cybersecurity?
That's another good question. So the fundamental core, and I just being in the U.S., I can tell you that the National Institute of Standards has been kind of the baseline, and many other European countries and other countries around the world have adopted and looked at NIST as not only the framework, but also specific standards like the SP, the Special Publication 800-82, that is good from a guidance standpoint. But the standard side of it, I would say more of the ISA, the International Society of Automation, 99 group, worked together since the early 2000s, post Y2K, have come together not just from folks that came from the asset owner side, so whether it's oil, gas, chemical, whichever, even mining and minerals and pulp and paper, but also have worked with our international standards counterparts, such as the International Electrotechnical Committee, so IEC, which then created the 62443 standard. And that standard is being globally adopted, which also does have ties into the National Institute of Standards framework. So there's a lot of things that are great there. The standards are a 4-part series, and it's important that those that have communications but also control systems, whether it's small factory lines, whatever it may be, that they adopt a standard and really look at, especially the global side, formulating what works for you within your environment, but your company. And the 62443 standard is one that I feel not only internationally is being adopted, but we're even seeing this in maritime, where such as DNV and ABS are putting these in their air classifications on vessels using 62443. So I think moving forward, you're going to see a lot of guidance documents that are going to be pointing to that specific standard. And if you're a company that is using safety systems or safety instrumented systems, then there's also a technical report for the IEC 61511, and that also has really good cybersecurity discussions and practices that the folks that are on the other side of this call can look up and go and get to read and to have their engineers. This is really an engineering fundamental, David. We really need to capture and make sure that the engineering side of it, the instrumentation folks, all the technologies that are being deployed and even managed and maintained in brownfields, that security is part of it and is baked into everything that we do. So that's a big piece, is pick a standard, stick with the standard, and really assess your environment, whether you do that internally or you have a third-party contractor come in and give you a fresh set of eyes, a blind eye type view into your systems. I think that's important.
Thank you, Mark. I have a question here from Christian Orduño, and he asks, how to start your plan over security operations, considering the whole organization in scope and its culture? What are the first steps?
So I didn't hear the very first part of the question. Could you repeat the first part?
Yes. How would you start with a plan that has in its scope the whole organization and its culture?
Excellent. Great question. So remember when I was speaking to the 62443 standards, it's addressed in the 2-1 standard. In that standard, it actually talks about how to roll out a program. Not just for the ICS, but this could also be adopted for even the IT if you have not a program in place yet. So it covers everything from multiple aspects before you even get to policies and procedures, but it definitely talks about training, and that training is also fundamental and fueled by culture. So you have to have corporate high-level buy-in, And that is all part of the program that is defined in 2-1. And what's nice about it is it's categorized. So it's a nice flow chart, and it gives you an idea of what a good program has and should look like. And it's up to you, the asset owner, to cherry pick from that and roll out what makes sense for you. So if you're going by the standard and you're adopting it for operational technology and control systems, I feel that it could be utilized for other things, whether that's IIoT, but also the enterprise IT space. I like it, especially because it's fundamentally cored around the ICS, the industrial control systems. So it goes a little deeper into more of the control systems aspects of it from a security standpoint. I think the other part of it is, other than the buy-in, is really working with your field asset owners, the folks that work on these systems. They are your first line of defense and your premium line of offense. You have to make sure that you're working with them. No, I lived this, especially from the plant side. I worked almost 2 decades as an asset owner in the chemical industry. And when things would come from corporate, it was usually a one-way push. It was not reciprocal. It was, this is going to be how we do it. I think if you're going to have a successful program, you want to get everybody that will be involved all the way down to the factory floor or the plant site and get input and feedback and understand their environment when you're building your program and you're building that culture. Because what will happen, and I've seen this so many times, is that you'll have a document or something pasted on the wall saying, don't do this, don't do this, don't do this, look for this. No one's following that document. So to really build the trust in the culture, you have to really start and find somebody to champion that sits in both sides, both of the operational side and also the IT side. I think it gains a lot of value, especially on the control systems piece, is that if you have a champion that came from the control system side that speaks that language, to be able to help the adoption across your fleet or your environment or your refineries or any of your plant sites. It makes more sense coming from someone that can also speak the language, but I never detract from saying that even the IT security InfoSec, as long as they have training and are empowered and are going out to the plant sites, they will be accepted as long as they have that integration. So it must be reciprocal. It must be a collaboration side, and people feel like they own it. You know, as we talked earlier in our discussion, we said that, you know, there has to be positivity around the culture change. And the one piece that I always say is you should award those that are doing right and doing good. And so make it a challenge. Many companies use safety bucks. We call it safety bucks, but rewarding folks with things that could be tangible for them to go and maybe do shopping or whatever it may be, but reward them. Make them feel like they're making a difference. And I think it's important.
Thank you, Mark. Generally, when we talk about ICS and OT, we think about chemical process plants or manufacturing plants, but does this also apply to intelligent buildings? And is there a specific standard for that?
So it does incorporate all different types of systems, including building automation and controls. The ISA, the International Society of Automation, has a building automation group, a division. And I really would like to say for those that are listening to go and look at that division, see about applying, because a lot of them are fundamentally adopting 62443 for that architecture, for those designs. So whether it's building automation, the digital city of the future, these are all going to have a lot of cyber physical devices. So it makes sense to try to find that standard and stick with that standard. The problem that we have, and I think it's a human problem, is that we try to come up with a new standard or a new guideline, but it's all the same thing. It seems like it gets regurgitated with a different stamp of approval on it. So I think with building automation is a great question. I think they're really wanting to stick with the 62443 and align with that standard. Again, it's global, and I think it makes sense.
Well, thank you, Mark, for sharing all this knowledge with us, and thank you for your time, and thank you for all the hassle that went through, that you have been through with this webinar. And I would just like to give you a couple of minutes so that you can wrap it up and give us your last thoughts.
Well, great. And, you know, David, thank you so much for having me, and your team has been amazing to work with, and thanks for reaching out and having this dialogue. I think the main thing that I want to make sure that that the audience understands is that the technologies and the connectivity to the internet, these are not going to go away. These are things that are going to expand as opposed to contract. We have to really make sure that we understand what we're doing from a business case within our environment. And that really does come from the C-level, to understand, you know, what is our critical function, and what is that, and what does a bad day look for us, or what does a bad month look for us? You know, what is our appetite for risk, and how long can we operate or stay alive as a company if we were cyber attacked, or whether it's either ransomware or direct cyber impact to where everything that you're doing is still not working. The other part of that too is making sure that from an asset owner perspective, do you have an incident response plan that actually talks about running in degraded mode? In other words, either semi-auto or semi-manual type processes. If the answer to that is I don't know, then you really do need to assess your systems. We've moved over to complete computer controlled systems, and we've removed a lot of the mechanical side of it, especially the manual switches. Most of these are all integrated to PLCs now. So I think that you really need to understand that aspect of it. So identify your critical function, determine what your high consequence event is for your company. And that may not be death and dismemberment. That might be just downtime or a logistics nightmare. Identify those. And I think in principle, if you do that and you do apply standards to your environment, I think you'll be able to decrease any likelihood or probability. Will you completely eliminate it? Never. You'll never be able to eliminate the likelihood of a cyber event or cyber incident, whether that's by tampering or accidental or even intentional means. What we do need to do is make sure that we go in and understand what we have, protect those systems, create and put the human back into the loop, especially when there is an issue. So incident response plans, tabletop exercises, those are all well and good. But where I've seen folks fail is they don't include the people that are actually at the factory floor, or they don't include them to the extent they should. And especially coming from that field and moving up and now being a global director for a large engineering, procurement, and construction company, I can tell you it's paramount that we get everyone involved. Everybody has a stake in cybersecurity. Everyone has a stake in operational integrity, reliability, and fundamentally and paramount safety. Safety is number one. And I just think that folks that are not sure what they have, feel free to reach out to me or through David. Happy to help. Happy to have the dialogue and at least get that understanding of where your pain points are at. What is it you're lacking? What visibility do you need? And where is that unverified trust that you're not aware of? So I think it's important to really kind of break that apart. And just know that this is cybersecurity for industrial controls is not a one and done project. It's a program. It is a life cycle program. We try to get better, and then the next day something else comes out, a new SolarWinds or a new 0 day. And we're going to be continually like a dog trying to catch its tail, like a puppy. It's something that we're going to be continually doing. So we have to identify what's in our house, what's on our street, within our networks, and protect them. So that's kind of my wrap up of the dialogue.
Thank you very much. It has been my pleasure and my privilege to have you here, Marc. I enjoyed very much this conversation, and thank you all of you guys standing here on our conversation. We'll see you on the next one. Bye bye, Marc. Goodbye.
Bye, David.
Tenemos más contenido como este para ti, pero antes te invitamos a inscribirte a nuestro canal y activar las notificaciones. Si te ha gustado este video, no olvides darle like y compartirlo con otras personas. También puedes guardarlo para el futuro o dejarnos un comentario, nos dará gusto leerte. El CONSEJOSI es una asociación civil enfocada en elevar la seguridad de la información y ciberseguridad en la escala nacional. Conoce más de nosotros y de lo que podemos ofrecerte visitando el sitio web concejosi.org.